Our story begins on a little island off the coast of Elsewhere called Khenarthi's Roost. This island is named after the Khajiit goddess of weather and the sky. Khenarthi finds many worshippers among the catfolk sailors and farmers, especially those who grow moon sugar cane. Moon sugar cane is the major ingredient in making skooma, which is a hallucinatory narcotic wildly addictive and in high demand all across Tamriel. Because of this, moon sugar cane is a wildly lucrative resource to whomever controls the plantations, and whomever controls the plantations ultimately controls the island. According to numerous shipping logs found on this island within the Elder Scrolls Online, Khenarthi's Roost produces over half of all of Tamriel's moon sugar cane and is a wildly profitable venture. In addition to the raw moon sugar, there are multiple backdoor refinement plants all across the island, where the skooma is refined and smuggled directly out of Khenarthi's Roost right onto the black market. Because of this profitable nature of moon sugar cane, the allegiance of the island is constantly being swayed between two or more parties. The lush island of Khenarthi's Roost is a place of calm beaches and tropical forest, making the perfect environment for moon sugar plantations. Native Khajiit fish in the Topal Sea here, and 10 marshy bamboo farms. In addition to the Khajiit, the sinister Maormer sea cultists with the power to command the fury of the sea lurk in the island's hidden caves and tide-swept grottos. Although these cultists are not native to Khenarthi's Roost, they are not blind to the lucrative nature of the island. We'll touch more on these cultists later, but for now, just know that they're always lurking around the beaches of this island, taking any opportunity they have to use their supernatural ability to command the sea to plunder shipping supply lanes. In the second era of the Elder Scrolls universe, Khenarthi's Roost belonged to the Kingdom of Pyandonea. The Kingdom of Pyandonea are referred to as the Maormer, also known as Tropical Elves, Sea Elves, or Fish Elves. The Maormer are especially distinguished by their skin and their eyes. Their eyes are clear and milky white, and their skin has a strange chameleon-like property. The Sea Elves also practice a powerful form of snake magic, being able to command and ride colossal sea serpents, which we'll talk more about later. For now, we're just concerned about the political struggle around Khenarthi's Roost between the Maormer and the Khajiit. As I mentioned, in the second era, the island belongs to the Maormer due to a mysterious ancient treaty formed with the Khajiit that gives them ownership of the island and control of all the importing and exporting ventures. The Treaty of Khenarthi's Roost is actually on the Imperial Library if you'd like to check it out. I'll make sure to link all my sources down below in the description if you're curious throughout the video. We don't know how the contract was put into play and if that was used by some abuse of power, but we do know the actual physical copy is potentially legitimate to some degree. Predictably, this had made the Maormer greedy and malicious, burning down entire plantations with the farmers still inside if they did not produce enough moon sugar cane. Because of this, the Aldmeri Dominion began diplomatic missions to the island to try and assist the Khajiit residents as best as they legally could, bearing in mind the ownership treaty of the Maormer. Side note, the Aldmeri Dominion in the second era consisted of Altmer, Bosmer, and the Khajiit of Elsewhere. Although Khenarthi's Roost hosts a native Khajiit population, the island is independent and currently under the control of the Maormer of Pyandonea. So again, predictably, the Maormer become enraged when they find out the Aldmeri Dominion is trying to win over the locals of the island. The Sea Elves denounce the Aldmeri Dominion and state that any ships carrying cargo to or from the island will be impounded and the crew imprisoned. The Aldmeri Dominion tries to push forward with peaceful solutions, but negotiations fail, bringing both sides closer to full-on conflict. Due to this new threat of the Aldmeri Dominion, the Maormer begin to look for allies and find a partnership with the equally unstable Sea Cultists or Sea Vipers, who are a cult of Maormer pirates. Originally, these two parties were not allied. According to the in-game material, the Sea Cultists actually caused quite a bit of trouble for the Maormer. Since the Maormer controlled Khenarthi's Roost for many years, it was mainly their shipping lanes that were actually being plundered by the Sea Cultists. Some shipping lanes, as I previously mentioned, were used by the black market, but the Maormer absolutely had a monopoly on the skooma and moon sugar cane. Although it's not documented, I would assume there's some kind of peace talk between the Maormer and the Sea Cultists saying, look, if the Aldmeri Dominion take control of this island, we're both going to be out of money. Let's put our differences behind us and work together to push these Aldmeri humanitarians out of this island. In this segment, I would normally talk about the significance of Khenarthi's Roost in future eras in the Elder Scrolls universe. However, I spent hours scouring the internet and I really couldn't find any other game or book that mentions Khenarthi's Roost from another era. The only future development we have documented of this story takes place about a year or so after the formation of the Maormer and the Sea Cultist Alliance. The capital of the Aldemari Dominion is in the province of Grotwood, and more specifically, it's in the city of Eldenroot. On the outskirts of this capital city, in an abandoned home, a diary can be found. In this diary, it is mentioned that there are rumors of a large Dominion fleet headed toward the Khajiit Island later this month. We don't ever know if this actually happens. There's no documentation if this Dominion fleet ever reaches the shores or if they're successful in liberating the island, but that's all we really have. The Kingdom of Pyandonea and the Maormer are barely mentioned in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, and it's either through a history book or from some random dialogue. Without a shadow of the doubt, the Elder Scrolls Online holds the most amount of information and interactability with these mysterious elves. In fact, the Maormer story continues to develop throughout the Elder Scrolls Online, which I could do a video on in the future. The tale of Khenarthi's Roost is unfortunately a tragic one. We don't ever know if the political and humanitarian issues are ever solved here, as there's little to zero documentation of this island or the Maormer people in chronologically future installments of the Elder Scrolls franchise. Although the Elder Scrolls Online takes place in the Second Era, the Maormer and the Sea Cultists have been allied for months, potentially years, by the time your character arrives in Khenarthi's Roost. The Sea Cultists have stranded dozens of ships over these months, potentially years, by summoning hurricanes, and you can see the entire coastline of the island is littered with the hulls of destroyed Dominion vessels. What may surprise you is only a chunk of Khenarthi's Roost story is about the Maormer in the Elder Scrolls Online. The majority portion of the questlines are about helping spirits, fighting undead, or just assisting the local farmers. There's this evil immortal wizard who plans to do a real Lich King move and take over Khenarthi's Roost with the undead. There's also spirits wandering around the island with quests to give you about magical artifacts, and additionally there's a handful of quests to assist moon sugarcane farmers around their plantations. A majority of this is not relevant to the lore or history of the island as a whole or the Maormer people, and so for that reason I just included this in a little segment because it kind of pales in comparison to the other stuff. About 30 to 40% of the Khenarthi's Roost storyline is about the Maormer and Sea Cultists, but as I mentioned, the story takes place well after the two parties' allegiance, as they've been in cahoots for quite some time before you arrive. Your task within the Elder Scrolls Online is to prove they are connected to each other and not separate entities, which both the Maormer and Sea Cultists claim. Nearing the end of the storyline of Khenarthi's Roost, a Khajiit representative agrees to further develop their relationship with the Aldemari Dominion for increased security. We know from the other sources I already mentioned in this video that this just furthers the turmoil between the Maormer and the Dominion, unfortunately putting Khenarthi's Roost in the line of fire. We know the Dominion is never able to fully liberate the island, as the Maormer have quite a bit of their economy relying on Khenarthi's Roost moon sugar plantations. The Maormer have become very reliant on this island, not only for the exports, but it is a vital port to access the southern and eastern seas of Tamriel. I hope you enjoyed this story about the history of the Maormer on Khenarthi's Roost. I try to make these videos not all about one game. If I do a video on Skyrim, Cyrodiil, Morrowind, etc., I will try my best to do an accurate history timeline across all games and not just one. However, it can't be ignored that the Elder Scrolls Online holds like 80% of all of the universe's lore. It has more locations, it has more lore books, it has more races of people like the Maormer that you just can't interact with any other game. It just has more in general. I know a lot of people don't enjoy ESO, but that doesn't mean it should be ignored. I believe it is considered canon. Coming from someone who's played almost every Elder Scrolls game, it holds some of the best stories you'll ever hear, and they're relevant across any era of the timeline. But the good news for you is, if you don't want to play Morrowind, if you don't want to play Oblivion or ESO, or whatever, you don't have to. I'm going to go through all those major zones of Tamriel and talk about any of the stories I find interesting on my adventures. As I'm sure you can tell by now, I'm a bit of an Elder Scrolls lore nerd, and I enjoy reading through text and going back to previous games to find new clues or references to stories. If that's something you're interested in hearing, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. These videos take extremely long to make, so I won't be spamming your sub box, but I do appreciate any support or criticism you might have. That's it from me. I've been Frostbreak, and I'll see you in the next one.